Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of The Period Party. I am here with Nat, and we are talking to Andrea Nakayama. She's a functional nutritionist and educator. Andrea is leading thousands of patients and practitioners around the world in a revolution to reclaim ownership over our own health. Her passion for food as personalized medicine was born from the loss of her young husband to a brain tumor in 2002. She's now regularly consulted as a nutrition expert for the toughest clinical cases in the practices of many world-renowned doctors, and the National Association of Nutritional Professionals recognized her with back-to-back Impact and Service Awards in 2015 and 2016. Awesome. Welcome, Andrea.
Oh, I'm
Hi,
so excited to be. Hello, Nat. Hello, Nicole. I'm so excited to be here with you.
This is awesome. I'm so excited to have you here. I feel like we have lots of ground to cover.
We do. So much to talk about in just this short time.
Yeah, you're going to have to talk really fast so that we get it all
in. We will do our best.
You can channel
I
your
think
inner
one of the
chipmunk.
first... Yeah. Nat, you're so funny. We actually like to joke that we love to start the period party pretty much every episode with some kind of joke or some laughing or something, because it just sort of automatically happens, doesn't it, Nat?
Yeah, we're good at making that happen.
It does.
We're pretty good at procrastinating in the beginning and then going, oh, wow, it's 5 minutes in. Let's actually talk about it. So we're not going to do that today because we've got a lot to get through, right?
Absolutely. I know. I think the first thing that I wanted to touch on was the difference between functional nutrition and other approaches, and how we look at hormones and health, because nobody really knows what functional medicine or functional nutrition is. It's very, very much the new kid on the block.
It totally is, and I love that you guys bring some humor to the conversation, because we have to laugh at these things. We have to laugh at ourselves. That's how we learn and explore the sort of edges of who we are. And functional nutrition is in keeping with the precepts of functional medicine. So really holding the truth of bioindividuality. So bioindividuality is also a term that's thrown around quite a bit these days, but in functional medicine and functional nutrition, where we're really using food as medicine, we're understanding that each individual is really unique. And we're also appreciating that there's an entire person. The person is not just their diagnosis or their signs and their symptoms, that there's really a complex of conditions inside, the environment within, as I like to call it, that make up who we are today. And that has to do with our genetics. It has to do with the things we've encountered in our lives. And it also has to do with our constitution or personality and all the aspects of who we are in relation to making habit changes and taking on new challenges in our lives. So just a quick summation of functional nutrition. In keeping with the precepts of functional medicine, there are 3 key points that I always like to point out. One is that we work in partnership. And by that, I mean that we as practitioners are working in partnership with each other. So, I as a functional nutritionist may be working with a functional or integrative doctor, with an acupuncturist, an herbalist. We all know how to work in partnership with each other in a really integrative fashion. And also, I'm working in partnership always with the patient. So they are actually the top of the pyramid in the partnership. And finally, in terms of partnership, I like the patient to be in partnership with their own body. And we've really gotten far away from that. The other 2 key precepts are that we use systems to help us kind of dive into the complexity of who the person is. So using the systems of the body, using systems to capture information. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, in functional medicine and functional nutrition, we're looking for the root cause. So we're doing what we call swimming upstream, saying, okay, I get that you have cramps or bloating or that you're bleeding excessively. Let's deal with that symptom, but I need to now figure out why it's happening. And functional nutrition, distinct from functional medicine, we're in there with the patients or clients in their every day. What's happening when you wake up in the morning? How are you sleeping? How are you falling asleep? When are you waking up? Do you have blood sugar issues? Really in the everyday practices. And that's the distinguishing factors there.
I love this because it's very, I'm as a Chinese medicine practitioner, everything comes back to, what we call tree and branch. So root and symptoms, basically. And, I feel like, as lots of modalities have been, they're banging their drum over here for a really long time going, hey, there's something in this, guys. And medicine and science has been like, no, it's very much about the symptoms. And so it's kind of done a full 360, which I just obviously absolutely adore because we can actually get to the root of the issues. But I love what else you're saying in the sense that it's all about the patient. And that's a new thing. I think it is anyway, because it's been, so much about the problem and not the patient and putting people in categories based on their diagnosis, not necessarily based on who they are. So, what you're saying is you're pretty much looking at the individual and their needs and recognizing that they're not necessarily a clone of their mother or the person next to them. We're not all exactly the same. So what we need is going to vary.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just like you said, Nat, I'm a huge fan of Chinese 5 elements, which is basically a functional practice. It's looking at the whole individual through a constitutional lens, but really appreciating that the fact that the body has the capabilities to come into its healing potential. And just like you said, I mean, I have Hashimoto's. And 2 people with Hashimoto's have it for different reasons. 2 people with breast cancer can have breast cancer for different reasons. One can be an underlying inflammatory imbalance. One can be an underlying hormonal imbalance. And we need to understand those things in order to address the signs, symptoms, and the diagnoses. What's really interesting to me is that medicine is actually there. The cutting edge medicine is looking at how is this tumor gene distinct from that one, so that we're not actually treating breast cancers all the same. We're understanding what's true about the oncogenes so that they can be treated. So there's a distinguishing factor between the genes versus the type or location of the cancer. And that's new in medicine. But we as patients, and I include all of us in that, are a little bit far behind the 8 ball here. We're not recognizing that there isn't one pill, protocol, or practitioner that's going to fix everything, and that we actually have to do this deeper work to understand who we are and what brought us here.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when my son has cystic fibrosis, and there's a lot of research in cystic fibrosis, they love to market everything as finding a cure, let's find the cure. Yeah. And so, what's been interesting in that journey, and he's almost 5, is that, in that time they've come up with what they're calling a near cure, which basically on a cellular level changes the way that his cells will work. And, it's this cutting-edge root cause treatment that everyone's like, wow, this is phenomenal. This is actually treating the root cause. And it's, one of the first times for a lot of these people that they would be exposed to this idea of actually treating the root and the problem, that, fundamentally what's actually going on a cellular level. But what you're also talking about is, how can we use our signs and symptoms and our diagnosis and then change our environment, change our diet, change our lifestyle to get the best out of our body, which then leads us to, less and less of those symptoms being turned on.
Absolutely. And oftentimes in the chronic conditions that we're seeing today, and there's an increasing amount of those, there isn't just one root. There's many roots, but they can be addressed with diet, lifestyle, modifiable lifestyle factors, as they're termed in functional medicine and functional nutrition. There's so much we can do with the decisions that we make every single day as patients to mitigate not just the signs and symptoms, but actually those roots, which is so empowering.
I love that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so here's what I want you to say to everybody, because Nicole and I will get this question all the time. Does diet really matter? Like, I get that all the time. I'm like, oh, gosh. So you tell us, does diet really matter?
Yeah, I mean, diet matters on so many levels. So first of all, we put information into our body every single day with what we eat. So, the digestive system, and I teach this in my professional training, it's really, there's a symbiosis that matters, and it's where food meets physiology. So one person's food can be another person's poison. And the way we understand that is by understanding that symbiosis, where the food meets the individual's physiology. So, somebody can eat quinoa and it can be the best food ever, and another person is going to have a stomach upset or another symptom, inflammatory. Yeah, there you go. Or like raw
I cannot eat quinoa.
I can't either. Or like raw kale or fermented food or bone broth. These things we think of as like, oh, that's the best food ever. There are certain people in certain conditions where it doesn't work. And we have to understand that as practitioners. So food matters because it's providing information for your cells all day long. So at that basic level, it matters. And then, like I said, there's a quote that Dr. Bredesen, he's an Alzheimer doc, and he talks about a theory that he calls 36 holes in the roof. And in Alzheimer's, they're saying there's 36 holes in the roof. There's all these different reasons that led somebody to the Alzheimer's diagnosis. If we can plug just half of those holes, then we see a reversal of the major symptoms. And the way we plug many of those holes is through diet and nutrition. So, we have to do a lot to get there. It's not just as simple as eat healthy. Sometimes when there's chronic issues, we have to go deeper. Oftentimes we do. But there is a lot we could do with how we eat for our unique needs.
This has such incredible potential for later on down the line, and looking at this as almost the future of medicine, this idea of personalized treatment that we really are sorely lacking.
Absolutely. And, my mission is to really empower the patient to be the agent of their own change. And I do that with our clinic and my nutrition team, with the thousands of practitioners that I train. It's really about empowering the individual. And we do that through education and helping all of us, every single woman here, to really understand themselves better, because that's how we make change.
Truly. We can recruit various foods at various times that are going to suit us according to whatever else is going on to treat a problem. But at the same time, the fundamentals still need to be there as well on a daily basis. So, we can use food to nourish our bodies daily, and we can use food as medicine as well. That's all I was going to say.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Andrea, how did your own hormonal history play into all of this? And I would love to hear a little bit about your story, because I feel that a lot of the time, Nat and I experience this, where clients will say, oh, well, you don't really know what it's like to be in my shoes and in my unique situation. And a lot of the times we actually do. And yes, we all respond differently to different events in our lives and different foods and whatnot. But it's always nice to hear a personal story and understand that most of us have come through some really big struggle.
Plus, it makes us look less silly.
Yeah, and I just want to say, when we're feeling like you don't get it, you don't understand. I mean, I had the unfortunate experience of losing my husband when I was 36 years old, and I had a 19-month-old child. And that's it's not an uncommon, but it's a rare situation to be in. I only knew one other widow, and she didn't live anywhere near me at my age, I should say. And I just want to say there, people would ask me, do you have good days and bad days? And I would say, yeah, but the bad days aren't when I cry, because that's kind of welcome. I'm not a big crier. The bad days are when I feel like nobody understands me and my life. I've just been thrown to the sidelines of the common path. And that was a bad day for me. So, ironically, the mantra I used to say to myself is opt in. Just opt in to any situation. Where can I opt in? Where can I see the commonalities between the moms on the playground and me? even though like there were a huge amount of differences. If I focused on the differences, I had hardship. If I focused on our commonalities, I felt connected. And that's really important because the more we isolate ourselves, the harder it is to really come into that deep cellular healing that we need. So I just wanted to say that to all of us because I get it. I get what it's like to be sort of cast aside in the societal norm and not feel like I fit anywhere. I still don't fit anywhere. So it's okay.
Totally.
Now, where can I opt in? If I go out to eat with friends and they're drinking and I don't drink because I have to take care of my body in a different way, how do I opt in? Opt into the conversation, opt into the things that I can partake in so I'm not left feeling like I don't belong here. So I just wanted to say that, and I know you mentioned in the intro that my husband died. So my husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor when I was 7 weeks pregnant. So for me, with a hormonal history that was preceded by difficult menstrual cycle, lots of cramping, cystic acne, fibrocystic breasts, that was all happening in my previous years. It took me about 9 months to get pregnant. So there was a struggle in that. And then when I did get pregnant, 7 weeks in, my husband was diagnosed with a deadly brain tumor, told he would have 6 months to live and not even live to see our child born. So here's a condition where our hormones are changing that environmental terrain tremendously. This is one reason why pregnancy is a trigger for a lot of autoimmune conditions, because the environmental terrain is really going through a lot of stress. There's a lot of chemical changes happening. So that was happening for me. And then we add the stress of being told that like my whole life is changing. I'm about to enter into this new phase, but I'm told a whole different story is going to play out than the one I had envisioned in my head, right? So tremendous amount of stress. Added to that, while I'm pregnant, we're going through 2 surgeries and radiation therapy and trying to save sperm so that we could potentially have more children later. And, there's a ton of stress in there. And it was a beautiful time as well because we got really close during that time. We did everything and anything to extend his life. I think of it as my boot camp as a nutritionist because I was in a completely different career at that time. And we did extend his life. He lived beyond 6 months. He lived almost 2.5 years and died when our son was 19 months old. And that's many years ago now. That was 2002. So it's been a long time. It took me a while to figure out I wanted to go back to school, put myself back through school. I was working full time, going to school, being a single mom. Stress, 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 right? So not a surprise that many years into this, I figured something was going on with my body that wasn't right. Something didn't feel right in my body. And I went to practitioner after practitioner after practitioner trying to figure out what it was. Nobody thought to look at my thyroid because I didn't present with most of the symptoms that are associated with hypothyroidism. I wasn't gaining weight in any way that was noticeable to them. It was noticeable to me, but it wasn't noticeable to anybody on the outside because I already took good care of myself. So I was already mitigating some of the effects, but the groundwork, those holes in the roof had been laid, right? So here was the manifestation then of my Hashimoto's, and I was able to determine what it was. And it took a long time and a lot of work for me to understand it and to become an autoimmune and Hashimoto's expert myself through my own understanding. But lots of hormone stuff in there.
So I think it's important for people to realize that you don't just land in a position as in, your Hashimoto's just didn't happen. It was a lifetime of things that led to that. But there's always that trigger that sort of, speeds up your signs and symptoms and sort of lets you know that that's what's going on. But so many people would be not necessarily in the same position, but have experienced some type of hardship or stress that has been the catalyst, and they kind of look back and go, that was the turning point. But it's also what they've done over a lifetime that's led them to that point.
Absolutely. And likely more than one trigger. And we can talk about this a little bit more in the, context of what is a medical memoir or a Menses memoir, or how do you understand your story through this lens?
Yeah,
I'm keen.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
I know. I love the term Menses memoir.
Yeah, there's so much we can be looking at, and exactly what we're talking about is understanding your own story as a means to aid your healing and be that primary partner that I was talking about. So in functional medicine and functional nutrition, we call what I call the story are the ATMs, the antecedents, the triggers, like you were talking about, Nat, and there's usually more than one, and the mediators. And so the antecedents are your genetics. And for me, just using my story, my mom has Hashimoto. She has ulcerative colitis. She has the genes for celiac disease. So there's definitely something that's been passed on to me that dictates what's going to happen with me. Now, I can turn those genes on or off, but the environmental factors, the epigenetics, are going to inform how the environment expresses itself. And those are the factors we control with our lifestyle habits and patterns, but some we can't control, like stress. The stress I went through, I'm a fairly resilient person, but it was still a lot of stress. That was going to knock me over. So yes, those are the triggers, and the triggers are the things that we can identify as everything was fine until. And when I'm talking to people who have significant health issues or any chronic health issues or autoimmunity, and you ask that question, do you know the point in your life where everything felt fine until that point? They usually can identify that. And if you're listening and you can't, a good question to ask yourself is, when in my life did I feel my best? So capture that moment when you felt your best in your life, and then consider what happened next, and what happened next, and what happened next. And in there, you start to find your story of where were the life triggers. Was it food poisoning? Was it a trip out of the country? Was it some kind of viral infection? What happened that tipped the scales for you where you didn't feel like you did before? You didn't feel your best. Now, the mediators, as part of your medical or Menses memoir, your story, are the factors that I think are most empowering, because those are the things that we get to identify make us feel better or worse. And knowing those things helps us to have more control. And personally, I like control, I'll confess, but I like to be able to know what makes me feel my best. I want to feel my best so I can accomplish what I want to accomplish in this life. And, I'm about to turn 50. I want to feel good about myself. So I like those mediators. So for me, mediator might be eating gluten or eating sugar. Those are negative mediators. They make my eyes puffy. Gluten, I can't even, I don't even know what it does anymore. I wouldn't go near it. But going to sleep too late, that's a mediator for me. If I go to sleep too late, past 10 or 10:30, I don't catch my adrenal curve. I can't fall asleep as easily. I don't stay asleep as easily. My night isn't as restful. And then I wake up in the morning, I'm not my best. And then there's positive mediators. What can I do every day that makes me feel really good? I can take my probiotics. I can make sure I go to bed on time. I can drink my matcha green tea, all those things. I can eat more leafy greens in a rainbow of colors. All those things are positive mediators. So this is how we start to identify and define who am I, and what does it mean to know who I am in relation to my signs and symptoms. If I eat more sugar, do I have more cramps when I have my period? If I drank the night before, we're constantly looking in our clinical practice at the mediators. Are those migraines happening when you're cycling? What could be happening both ways that's informing the environment that's expressing signs and symptoms.
Wow. That was so good. I don't know if Nat, if you have anything to add to that, but I want to say that to me totally encompasses this idea of body literacy and really developing a really comprehensive understanding of how your body functions, because that's when you can advocate for yourself and you can become your body's best friend rather than constantly looking outside of yourself for the solutions or looking to a doctor to quote unquote fix you.
I just wish that, so often it takes some type of life event for us to have this perspective, that we're talking about. And I think the more that we can talk about that, I know sometimes it's really hard to understand it unless you've, like you said, you've had a life event. Or like you said, I just loved what you said about when did you feel your best and what was going on and, getting people to map that out to take them where they need to go. I just hope and wonder, I guess, how we can help other people understand that. From even my passion lies with young girls and young women, because we don't have the perspective yet. We kind of need to draw on the wisdom, yet we know it all when we're young as well. So I just think there's so much in what you've got to say and how we can teach others with that too, because it's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you're talking about is what I like to call nonviolent communication with self. So, in the 60s, there was a movement of nonviolent communication where you have a partner and you listen to what they have to say. And before you respond or react, you take it in and then you respond. And we don't do that with our bodies. We feel the sign or symptom. We either push it down, we gloss it over, or we look outside of ourselves. And so when I talk about that partnership that I mentioned in the beginning when we first started talking in relation to what is a functional practice, that partnership with self is about this nonviolent communication with self and how we listen in. Like, what is my body telling me? Why am I bloated right now? Wow, my cramps this time are really worse than they were the last cycle. What is that telling me? How do I look at what I did before? And it doesn't need to be in a navel-gazing fashion. It needs to be in sort of an awareness. We're really bringing into a deep, it's sort of enlightenment in how we live our everyday.
Awesome. I'm sorry, I was on mute because I keep choking.
Are you okay?
Yeah,
I was on mute too because, yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Well, I was on mute too because I always want to make sure that there's no background noise whatsoever because I live in New York City. And there are no such thing as soundproof anything here.
I love hearing the horns.
No, it's outrageous.
In the background. It's like, dun, dun. I'm like, yeah, she is. Yeah, she is.
The most obnoxious thing ever. Yeah, I know. No kidding. Everyone says that. Anyways. So, Andrea, do you have another 5 minutes? You want to keep going? we really want to keep going with all of this. It's so good.
Yeah, fine.
Okay, amazing. So I would love to, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but just in talking about the benefit of tracking our cycles and understanding our history, Nat and I feel like we talk about this ad nauseum, but I would love to hear your perspective on this as well, if you would like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to say, it's funny for me to look back at that time in my life when I was trying to get pregnant, because that was before the brain tumor boot camp where I learned to read a brain scan and nutrition and anti-inflammatory and cancer. I learned so much during that time. But prior to that, I was trying to get pregnant, and I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting pregnant. I had normal 28-day cycles. I did have symptoms in relation to my cycle, but at that point, I decided I was going to step back, and this is very true to form to who I am today, and read more about what was happening in my body. So I read Toni Wexler's Taking Charge of Your Fertility, which I think is one of the best books ever written, and was flummoxed. Right. I was like, why have I not been taught this? Why are girls not taught this when they're taught about birth control? Because it was fascinating to me that I could actually understand what was going on in my body and when I was most fertile and if I was actually fertile enough to, if my cycles were at the right length to actually, for implantation to happen and stick. Like, I just was floored. So that was a really critical time in my life that I look back on, and it very much informs who I am as a practitioner and a teacher today, because I was using the understanding of physiology as a tool to better understand myself and to get the results that I wanted, which is exactly what I do now. So tracking our cycles tells us so much about ourselves and so much of where there might be mishaps. And this is why obliterating the natural cycle in some way, and, I understand people need to be on birth control for different reasons at different times, but when we don't get to see what's naturally occurring, we may be missing something that is true to our root causes. So for me, tracking the cycle is just so critically important. And I have people do it all the time, whether they're trying to get pregnant or they're using it as a method of natural birth control. It tells us so much information. So I'm a big fan of cycle tracking and what that information reveals. And oh my gosh, like, there's so much more information available in that realm today, and apps and tools. Like, I was doing this in 2000. There was it was not this terrain that we have available.
It was a piece of paper.
Yes,
it was a piece
exactly.
of paper that sat by your bed, and you marked it off every night or every morning.
I made an Excel spreadsheet that I tacked on my bathroom wall, and I hung a pen from with a pin hanging there so I could wake up and go in every day and mark it down.
I'll tell you a funny story. I had someone come up to me randomly in the street, and I've got an e-course called Debunking Ovulation, which basically teaches, natural fertility awareness. And anyway, so she says to me, "Oh my goodness, you don't know me, but I have to tell you this story. I've been following natural fertility awareness, and I watched your e-course, and, I printed off charts because I wanted to have, the paper and write it down and have that to check back up on." And she said it was on the bedside table, and it somehow made its way into a heap of files or papers that they needed for a meeting. And she was a developer, a developer, like a property developer. Anyway, so they're in this really important meeting, and her husband pulls her January cycle sheet, and he's drawing all over it. And she said she's sitting there mortified because the whole boardroom table is looking at this piece of paper that's got wet, dry, moist, like everything that's happened. And she said, I was absolutely horrified. She said the only saving grace was that they were all men, and they would have had no idea what it was all about, besides the sex part. They would have had no idea that she... I was like, oh my goodness, that is the best story ever. And she was pregnant. It was so funny.
That's awesome.
So funny. So this is why your apps are very
amazing,
handy.
though.
They're not going to wind up on some boardroom table that was very important and where she's trying to keep a straight face. Oh, my gosh.
Exactly. Yeah, whole different terrain.
Thank God for apps. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. I know. They're
on our phone
now.
I mean,
exactly.
Me neither. I've been doing this for nearly 10 years now, so same thing. Pretty funny. Okay, so I suppose we could just go into one of the last things that I really wanted to touch on. And I think that, for the most part we've covered this, but just how women can get an understanding of how they might need help. How do you know whether you need help? And what can you really start to do to address period problems that you might be experiencing, especially the ones that you've described that you also experience, Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of you are doing such an amazing job of educating people about how to support their own body and understand what's going on and how to make changes. And what I would say from my lens, where I'm working with people with really major chronic health conditions, is that if things aren't seeming right, listen to your instincts. If things don't seem right in your cycle, if you're bleeding too much, if you're worried, if you're not not bleeding at all, if things just aren't getting better, then definitely find some support. You have 3 people right here who can support you. Definitely you two with what you're doing. It's, like I said, amazing. So definitely reach out if you're somebody who isn't able to make sense of what's happening in your body. A lot of times what I'm going to see with people also is really excessive bleeding, and then we're going to see changes in the red blood cell formation, in energy, in the immune system. There's so many things that can happen when the body isn't cycling right, and at the same time, a cycle that isn't quite right, it could be indicative of more upstream imbalances. So when I'm looking at a person's health history, hormones and neurohormones are one piece of the puzzle, but there's so many other pieces that is informing and that are informing that area. So definitely seeing the body as a whole in terms of the physiological systems, what's happening within your body. I like to call that what's going on in there. So understanding the gastrointestinal tract, the immune system, oxidative stress, what's on in there. We don't know, right? So there's so many things. And I would just say raise your hand if you're somebody who doesn't understand what's happening with your cycle. It's likely something that would benefit from somebody with a deeper perspective taking a look at it.
I love that. It's tax time for us here. Is it tax time everywhere in the world? I don't know. But anyway, I don't go and expect my accountant to be able to give me acupuncture.
Right.
I just don't.
Right.
So, you know, when it comes to our health, you know, we need to be enlisting. And like you said at the beginning, it's about building your tribe, like building your support crew, your cheer squad, those people that are on board with what you need. And it's so hard to find that too.
Yeah, you know what's kind of amazing is a friend was reflecting to me the other day what good care I take of myself. And I don't actually think about it like that, but there was an allowance I gave myself when my husband died to take care of myself. I knew I needed it. I knew I needed therapy and acupuncture and massages, and I just gave myself over to what I now call my support staff. Right? I allow myself, and I don't mean my team, and there's plenty of them too, but I mean the people who help me stay in that place of resilience. And what I want to encourage women to do and to believe is that you're worth it, that paying the extra money to have community support, a practitioner who's really looking out for you is worth it, and it will go a long way, not just in making you feel better now, but in helping you way into the future. So taking care of yourself and listening to when something doesn't feel right is key to your optimal health.
Yeah, absolutely. So Andrea, we could talk, couldn't we? We could keep on talking all day. We love listening to you. Where can our listeners find you?
Yes. So for people who want to visit our website, my website is replenishpdx.com, and that PDX, that's the shortcut for Portland. I live in Portland, Oregon, and originally I didn't think I'd have a global audience, so this was a surprise. So Replenish PDX, and you're welcome to join our newsletter. There's lots of great information. I love to write, so I make sure people have this up level of information. And if you happen to be a practitioner who's listening, the practitioner side of things, which is actually my biggest passion and the biggest part of the business, is holisticnutritionlab.com. And there are amazing free resources for you there to be the best practitioner you can be and to really understand what it means to step into this functional thinking that we've been talking about.
There's something for absolutely everybody. Thank you so much, Andrea, for taking the time to chat with us today. We love what you do. We're massive fans. We will be back again next week, won't we, Nicole? We will be back next week. Until then, everybody, have a beautiful week. Thanks again, Andrea, and we will speak to you all then.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea.
Take care.
So much. Bye-bye.